African leaders expose how white is exploring Africa with white agenda, how they import anti-aircraft from Asia countries to Nigeria and distribute them to other three African countries. Now is the time for African leaders to wake up against white supremacy, white modern colonialism. When will African leaders think about their own citizens, think about their own country, think about their continent? But this is the time for African leaders to do the right thing, to call the white to order.
And one shameful thing I will tell you, I wish we have satellite so we can say, okay, spend 1 week and in looking at the activities of foreigners in Nigeria. There are more foreigners in wrong places in Nigeria in hundreds of thousands by the day, just in search of solid mineral resources for themselves. But there are individual Nigerians who are standing in for them. To now identify this aspect of arms proliferation and then understanding the sources of promotion of insurgency in Africa. We discovered an Asian country that was importing a gun called AA, anti-aircraft guns, most dangerous. But then they discovered the weaknesses in Nigeria and in bringing these anti-aircraft guns, bigger, with bigger bullets that can bring down any aircraft, no matter the size.
For an African to visit a European nation, an ordinary African, to visit a European nation is like, let me give you an example my teacher used to use. It's like trying to milk an elephant because of the visa process. However, for a European to visit an African nation, most of our nations, it is like a walk on the beach. It's like going to have a cup of tea. But then that is not the problem. The tragedy is that now for an African to visit a fellow African within the African Union, the visa restrictions in many of our nations, among us, between our brothers and sisters, is like trying to brush the teeth of a crocodile.
Please do not buy into the anti-African agenda. Africans are hated everywhere. So Soweto cannot afford to hate Africans. Black people are hated everywhere. When you see a black person, see yourself. When you see a black person, say, my brother, my sister, let's work together to build the African continent so that it can compete with the United States of America, it can compete with Europe, it can compete with China.
Now, Uganda has got a lot of uranium. Some years ago, a Western company came and proposed to mine the uranium. They came here, said they want to mine the uranium. I asked them, mine it and take it where? They said, export it. That was their answer.
Unfortunately, there is even less intra-African trade. And our trade with the outside world amounts to billions of dollars. But we trading even amongst ourselves is a problem. Why can't we, for the sake of our children, the sake of our continent, and for the dignity of black people all over the world, unite, reconcile, work together as a formidable continent? Because we are the wealthiest continent on the face of the earth in terms of natural endowments. Unfortunately, in realistic economic terms, we are the poorest of the...
A Pan-Africanist I am very concerned about the happenings in Africa, especially West Africa. Yagut, of recent, I have seen the ECOWAS introducing the anti-coup d'etat unit.
We have satellite, so we can say, okay, spend 1 week and in looking at the activities of foreigners in Nigeria. There are more foreigners in wrong places in Nigeria in hundreds of thousands by the day, just in search of solid mineral resources for themselves. But there are individual Nigerians who are standing in for them. And there are hundreds of thousands of whites who sit with Boko Haram, who feed Boko Haram. They share common food. They recharge their batteries for their telephones, for their laptops, with which they are being communicated to by hostile international bodies in dealing with the same Nigeria. And such international hostile bodies are also patronizing your oil and your natural resources. And to you, it is right. And one disturbing thing we discovered is that the whole world over, anywhere you go, a foreigner has some no-go areas in that country. There are places you cannot go, but only in Nigeria. The citizen has some no-go areas. The foreigner has everywhere to go to. Only in Nigeria, failure of institutions, lack of foresight, lack of laws, lack of law enforcement, lack of knowledge in our law enforcement, lack of patriotism in our leaders or in some of our leaders at all sub levels that are entrusted to provide leadership. Meaning, once you have the leadership in Nigeria, you are just coming to do labor work in a scientific manner, carrying all along. That's why I can say at this point to tell you, any person that lacks the wherewithal, the energy, the vision, the capacity, the patriotism, any person who has stolen yesterday and coming to say, I have repented and I'm coming to provide leadership, that is deceit. Don't accept such a person. And I'm not campaigning, I'm not telling people to look for who, but I'm telling you there are numerous qualities to look for. But people with such qualities that are in the rest, if only Nigerians know, they should know that these are fake people. They are coming in to give you the worst that we are in. I'm sorry. I don't like delving into it, but out of education, and I think there is the need for us to talk about this. One may ask, what is the population of Libya? What is the population of their armed forces? What is the size, what is the strength of their own armed forces? Army, Navy, Air Force. What are their arms holdings? How can Libyan arms holdings be seen to supply the whole West Africa and North Africa? Is that a cover story? What's the quantity? Arms supplied to Libya are documented. They keep them in their armories. The countries that supplied them are known. And from serial this to serial this are there. The intelligence bodies in Nigeria and around the whole world, they do that. Once you take a weapon and then look at the number, you'll be able to know who manufactured it and for whom and when. And whose own armory is this supposed to be? I know there was breakage into their armories. I know there were rebels in Libya. But the number of rebels that emerged, a census was taken by United Nations. And they discovered in Tripoli alone, there were 301 rebel groups. I repeat, 301 rebel groups, a census taken by United Nations. These 301 are different rebel groups. They fight themselves. The question is, the arms are also not enough for them. What is the balance that came to West Africa? Who is involved in creating that story? Who is involved in arms importation, illegal, and arming his people that give us as a cover story? So that's why you see, once you see a political body or a country given a story, don't take it, look at it, x-ray it, and make sense. God has given you the capacity to ask questions and look for answers. I tell you today, with all sense of humility, none part of our borders is fully manned. There is no port today in Nigeria that can say, we have inspected all the containers coming to us and we issue them certificate of being arms free. None. I challenge you, none. It was of recent that some of us talked about scanners and became a challenge. So some of the bodies responsible for that, only last 2 weeks, they now became serious and began to say scanners have been imported and they are on their way. They said so. But we asked the questions. But arms have been coming in unabated. And there was a time also early this year when some of us, in trying to now identify this aspect of arms proliferation and then understanding the sources of promotion of insurgency in Africa, we discovered an Asian country that was importing a gun called AA, anti-aircraft guns, most dangerous. But then they discovered the weaknesses in Nigeria and in bringing these anti-aircraft guns, bigger, with bigger bullets that can bring down any aircraft, no matter the size. But Nigeria is their own transit point. So when the buyers in Nigeria collect them, they were also helping in transiting them to 3 other countries plus Nigeria, making 4. Mali, Mozambique, and Congo DRC. Congo DRC, Mozambique, Mali, and Nigeria, 4 of them, nothing more. But you know, in the aviation world, once rebels or bandits, as we have, or Boko Haram, began to get themselves armed much more with anti-air defense guns, then it is evident the aviation authority world over may declare your airspace what? A safety question. So you may be declared a no-flying zone. It happened before to Chad when rebels were fighting, and they took a lot of anti-aircraft guns in their hands. So the whole world, all aircrafts were to bypass Chad in going to wherever they were, until sanity was restored with the president that was killed lately. So in Nigeria, there is much more from the international market coming through our waters into us, coming through our borders into us.
For an African to visit a European nation, an ordinary African, to visit a European nation, is like, let me give you an example my teacher used to use. It's like trying to milk an elephant because of the visa process. However, for a European to visit an African nation, most of our nations, it is like a walk on the beach. It's like going to have a cup of tea. But then that is not the problem. The tragedy is that now for an African to visit a fellow African within the African Union, the visa restrictions in many of our nations, among us, between our brothers and sisters, is like trying to brush the teeth of a crocodile. They came, divided us, and they have taught us to keep each other from each other. Them, they're mingling with each other and making money and growing, but they have taught us to hate each other. But for us to really enjoy the true economic benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we need to behave like the Europeans and allow for the free movement of people and trade. To this end, in our contribution to this continental aspiration, Kenya is committed to progressively, and we are moving very fast by the end of this year, to abolish visas to citizens from African Union member states to make it easier to invest and do business in Kenya and across the continent. We are going to open the borders of Kenya. We do not fear our fellow Africans. Come, travel to Kenya. Live, do business in Kenya. Trade, make money in Kenya. And we hope we'll get reciprocity with the rest of you. Let us open our continent so that we can make money and live together. Let us remove the shackles of...
Do not buy into the anti-African agenda. Africans are hated everywhere. So Wetu cannot afford to hate Africans. Black people are hated everywhere. When you see a black person, see yourself. When you see a black person, say, my brother, my sister, let's work together to build the African continent so that it can compete with the United States of America, it can compete with Europe, it can compete with China. You hate Africans, but you don't hate the Chinese. You always say the Africans are taking your jobs. Stop being used on black violence. Stop being used on an anti-black agenda. Love yourself, and once you love yourself, you love another black person. Now an African who threatens me. Wake Muchabi, the African. Like it anale Musadi waka, like it bonale Nigeria, agenata balilo nashem. Yala le now got ale babona ma Nigeria le chuweso. Don't be scared. We are one thing that was divided by colonialists because they were threatened by the unity of Africans. Can you imagine there is an African currency, Barunal currency of Africa. That currency is going to be more powerful than the dollar itself because that currency will be backed by the minerals of Africa. Today, the pound of Britain is one of the strongest currencies. Why? Backed by gold. But when you go to Britain, there is no gold mine. But they've got the biggest gold reserves all over the world. Because they come take it here, they came and stole it here, and they've stored it there. And that's what makes them unique. There is no France. There is no France without Africa. The day Africa liberates itself from France, France will collapse as a country because France, it is based on everything African. They don't have anything to offer to themselves. They keep on taking from Africa. So please, let's make sure that we plow the idea of African unity. We may not be there when Africa gets one president, but we'll be the ones who have planted that idea amongst our children and our...
There is a crisis now in an African country known as Niger. I think some of our friends from West Africa know it better, Togo and Cameroon, they know it better. You have heard of the quarrels going on in Niger, in West Africa, about uranium being taken to Europe. That's how I came to know recently. When this crisis started, we started getting information that apparently Niger is exporting a lot of uranium to Europe and to France for them to use in their nuclear power stations to generate electricity for themselves. So this morning I took interest. I said, by the way, what is the electricity supply in Niger? Before you sell uranium to the other person, how about you? What's happening to you? Now I found, I was told, there is a measurement they call kilowatt hour per capita. Kilowatt hour per capita. Apparently, the kilowatt hour per capita of electricity in Niger is 51. 51. Every person in Niger is using 51 kilowatt hour per capita. The GDP of Niger is $613. Now, here in Uganda, our kilowatt hour per capita was very low, was like this some years ago, was as low as this one of Niger. But now it's about 300, still very low, but that's where it is. Then how about the United States? What is the kilowatt hour per capita of the United States? 12,000. 12,000. And there is a country called Iceland. It has got a lot of electricity. Of course, they have got a small population, but it is 54,000. Now, Uganda has got a lot of uranium. Some years ago, a Western company came and proposed to mine the uranium. They came here, said they want to mine the uranium. I asked them, mine it and take it where? They said, export it. That was their answer. I asked them, export it for what purposes? They told me, for the purposes of generating nuclear energy, for electricity, and other uses such as medicine, vector control, etc. I then asked them, have you heard a rumor that there are some human beings here in Uganda who need electricity, who need nuclear medicine, and who need vector control services? I asked them, you want to take the uranium, but have you heard a rumor that there are some human beings here? It's not confirmed that they are there, but could it be a rumor that there are some human beings here? Why don't you propose to build that capacity here for the benefit of these human beings who live in Uganda? And maybe we can put aside some quantity of uranium for supporting the economies of our friends in the West. After that, after you have addressed my issue, I can also share with you so that you also go and solve yours. But to tell me that you solve my problems and forget yours, I cannot accept that. They never came back. They never came back. So the uranium of Uganda is sleeping in the ground until we are ready to use it. We have now agreed with the Russians and the Koreans to build 2 nuclear power stations for electricity of 15,600 megawatts total. Imagine, just 2 stations will produce 15,000 megawatts. One 7,200 megawatts, the other one 8,400 megawatts. Our biggest dam on the Nile is the Karuma with 640 megawatts. The hydro. The biggest opposition of our plan of building an integrated national economy has been mainly internal, from some elements of the political and bureaucratic classes who perform the role of comprador bourgeoisie, agents of foreign interests Mao Zedong talked about in China. Unlike the national bourgeoisie, who build our economy, the comprador bourgeoisie, raw material exporters, importers of foreign products that can be made here, commission agents, bleed our economy. The national bourgeoisie, who are manufacturers, hotel owners, tourism operators, professional service providers such as doctors who treat people here instead of patients going out for treatment, internal distributors of our products such as food, build our economy. There are businesses which build our economy, which infuse blood into our economy. There are those businesses which drain blood from our system for the benefit of the outsiders. And these are the ones Mao Zedong called the comprador. Comprador is a French word meaning agent of. Therefore, We, the raw materials producers, need to conduct internal struggles in our respective countries to add value to these raw materials, including coffee, so that we earn more from our sweat and create more jobs for our youth instead of dying in the Mediterranean going to Europe. We also need to sensitize our partners in the countries that have been buying our raw materials at same slave prices that their economics is defective. What will the USA or Europe or Asia lose if Africa sells added value coffee to them instead of the raw materials of the raw material form and earn more money? What if the value addition is done to other raw materials like copper, gold, iron ore, lithium, etc.? Money to Africa will mean higher purchasing power for Africa. The Africans who now lack electricity will be able to afford to pay for electricity. Where will the turbines come from, the ones for generating the electricity? Will they not come from Europe, USA, Russia, China, or from other partners? So what we are proposing by adding value
I am very concerned about the happenings in Africa, especially West Africa. Yagut, of recent, I have seen the ECOWAS introducing the anti-coup d'etat unit. Ñu ne pour coup d'etat dafa war a stop ku ko def. They will form a big unit, ñu ñëw attaque la. We are not in support of coup d'etat. Let me make that very clear. And I want them to hear this. We are not in support of coup d'etat. I was a member of the Pan-African Parliament and have advocated strongly for us to introduce a term limit to make sure that we do away with coup d'etats in Africa, especially in West Africa. So meaning, I am not in support of coup d'etat. But I have a concern. Before setting up a unit or anti-coup d'etat unit in ECOWAS, isn't it time that the African head of states or the ECOWAS head of states look into the reason why there are coup d'etats? What are the root causes of coup d'etats? Let them put their house in order first before they set up an anti-coup d'etat unit. Let them put their house in order. And I believe their house is not in order. This unit is set up to defend them and to protect them only, nobody else. What is more coup d'etat than your national constitution give you 2-term limit, 5 years, 2 terms. After serving 10 years, you want to change the constitution for another term. Is that not a coup d'etat? Because you feel you have the powers to do that. The soldiers have the powers to coup d'etat. That is also another coup d'etat. And they are living with them there. They are there. In the name of civilian, putting on mufti clothes, calling yourself a Democrat, when you loot all the resources of your country, mislead people, torture them, imprison them, burn their businesses to us, and you call that a democracy? Or a civilian rule and an illegally elected government? The leaders must stop lying to their electorate first. They must stop the corruption. They must stop looting our resources. They must understand that they are not a better citizen than anybody. They are given a responsibility, a role to play to help develop the countries and make sure that there is peace and tranquility and respect the constitution of the country. But this is not happening. Example is this government. This government has lied to people in 2016 that they are going only for 3 years. Was that not a lie? Who asked them to tell people that we are going for 3 years? Were they forced to say that? They went around the whole country, lied to everyone. When the people started reminding them, this is what you promised us, they threw tear gas on them. And the president is bragging, yes, when I threw tear gas in them, they never came back. Does that not anger the citizens? You throw tear gas on your people. Some of them are wounded and you stand out there and bragging that I throw them a tear gas. They never come back. That alone can anger the citizens. You promised the people you will have a security sector reform. It's never happening. The civil service sector reform is never happening. The Janneh Commission was violated before the end of the commission. When you take all the assets of the former president, and now you are busy buying assets, your days are coming. I thought they should have learned, or they could have learned from this. Unfortunately, they are not learning. So before you create a unit to go against any attempt of coup d'etat, put your house in order. Stop lying to your electorate. Stop lying to your citizens. Stop looting the resources of your country. Stop corruption in your country. And then you can talk about anti-coup d'etat. When Alpha Condé was killing his people in Guinea, after serving 10 years, he said it was not enough. I want to serve another term. During the process, so many Guineans were killed. And I did not hear any ECOWAS going there or condemning him. You know why? Because Guinea was too big for them, or Alpha was dancing to their tune. Because I think that was why the small Gambia was surrounded all sides by soldiers and guns in 2016. Because Gambia was small, or Gambia is a small country, and Jammeh was not dancing to their tune. After the presidential election in Guinea, more than 300 Guineans were butchered, killed. No ECOWAS condemned him. No African Union condemned him. Instead, they pick up their phones and say, Monsieur le Président, félicitations, congratulations. That is the fair game that is happening in Africa. They can condemn Mali. They can condemn Guinea. They are soldiers. But the one in Chad, who has been given a red carpet from the African Union, was never condemned, and he's a soldier too. He's a soldier. They can give him a red carpet to the African Union. But the other soldiers are condemned for their attempt or for their act. Where is the fairness in ECOWAS or in the African Union? They are not representing us. I believe they are representing themselves. So we are calling them to remember that power belongs to the people. Alassane Ouattara knows how he came into power with Gbagbo. He knows. But he finished his 10-year term, he changed the constitution for another term. They are there with him. Nobody condemns him. They are not there to condemn him because he's dancing to their tune. So I'm calling on ECOWAS to do the right thing. We young Africans, we are here watching, and we fear nothing. I don't have to be a president to be a Gambian. I don't have to be a president to contribute my quota towards national development. But I'm a proud Gambian and a proud African.